It always starts where you should feel safest, inside your own home. In Texas, people have woken to strangers at their windows, footsteps on their porches, and even stalkers hiding in their attics. Welcome to Mr. NightSpook. People of Texas, these stories are for you. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing who's out there in the dark with us. And remember, many of you watch without subscribing. Don't make that mistake because the next stories will be even scarier. I'm not the kind of mom who checks the locks twice. Once was plenty in our Dallas rental on Kenworth Drive, where the night smells like warm lawn and chlorine and the air conditioners hum like sleeping dogs. I work evenings at the clinic. Marlon stacks produce, and our daughter Rosie, 3 years old, sleeps under a quilt with cartoon bees. Ordinary. That's what we paid for. The first night, I was folding laundry at the foot of our bed. The TV down the hall whispered the late forecast in leaked blue. Rosie mumbled in her room. I waited for her fake cough, the one that buys a second glass of water. No cough, just a soft single laugh. Then she padded into our doorway, hair a pale halo, eyes bright. "Mommy," she said, "the man is outside. Words can change your blood temperature." "What man?" She waved toward our bedroom window, toddler wave, open palm. The blinds were shut. Between the slats was a seam of dark. I made a little eye with 2 fingers and looked. A man stood in the middle of our front lawn. Not at the curb, not on the sidewalk. On the grass, hands at his side, still as if poured into that posture and left to set. No mask, no hat. Black hoodie, jeans. Ordinary in the way a scarecrow is ordinary until it's just you and it. "Call?" I whispered to Marlon. "Don't turn on the porch light. We had rules after the break-in on Spruce. Call first. Announce nothing." The dispatcher took our address. "Is he attempting entry?" she asked. "No," I said, my voice a stranger's. "He's watching." "Describe him?" "Average height, average build." His face was blank, not bored, blank like a waiting page. He didn't check his phone or shift his weight. He simply watched the house that kept my child. Rosie stood at my knee, delighted and confused, and waved again. The man's hands stayed where they were. Red and blue slid around the corner. The living room filled with cheap Christmas. The man didn't run. He didn't even look. In the breath it took to make sure Rosie was behind my legs, he wasn't there. Officers swept the hedges and the side gate and the alley. Tight Mustache wrote on a pad and told us it was probably a drunk or a kid or somebody lost. "People don't like to be seen," he said, as if that were a law. We nodded like we'd been reassured. After they left, the house came back to us with a shudder, like it had been holding its breath. We pushed a dresser against the door, though we knew it wouldn't matter. I told Rosie he was gone. I told myself he had never really been there. Some lies melt quick. Morning put a new coat of normal over everything. I drove to the clinic where nothing happens until everything does. By noon, the man felt like a glitch you fix by tapping the screen. I didn't mention him to the other nurses because saying fear out loud pins a label to it, and labels stick. That night, Marlon worked late. I was rinsing the last dish when my name seemed to form itself in the air above the sink. Not a voice, a shape of a voice. The kitchen lights were off. My reflection quivered in the window. I left the dishwater and went to Rosie's room. She was sitting up, one finger against her teeth. "He's back," she said, like sharing a secret. She lifted her hand and waved, slower now, the way you wave to someone you recognize. I pulled the blinds. He was closer, just beyond the flower bed of tough little purple perennials whose name I forget. Same posture. If he had eyes, I didn't want to know where they were pointed. Watching measured each inch of our home. Watching traced the path from crib to door. I didn't call. I stood with my back to the wall, counting the house's tiny noises. The tick of the thermostat, the relay click of the fridge, the faraway freight of the freeway. He belonged to none of it. He was the rest between notes that makes the next note worse. I waited the night to pieces. By morning, he was memory and lawn again. We bought a camera anyway. $80 to borrow a new kind of certainty. The app pinged at 1:37, a fox crossing the yard. 2 o'clock, a moth throwing itself at the porch bulb. 2:12, motion detected. There he was in grainy grayscale, first dead center on the grass, next on the seam where lawn met walk. The frames jumped. He didn't walk so much as occupy the next square. The last image was a bright bar of his shoulder near the glass, then nothing. We emailed it to the station. A day later, the reply came. We reviewed the footage. Subject cannot be identified. Recommend additional lighting, maintain logs, call if he attempts entry. It went on. Our lives narrowed to a slit between slats. Rosie started leaving things on the sill. Her plush bear propped to look out, a paper heart cut with blunt scissors, a glitter glue star. He likes stars, she told me solemn. On Friday, a storm shouldered over the neighborhood and the lights hiccuped. The Wi-Fi died. The camera went blind. Habit steered me to the window anyway. He was there, rain riding him in silver closer than ever, warm against the glass without touching it. I pressed my palm to the pane like a dare. He lifted his hand and set it on the other side. The glass didn't get colder. It got heavy. For a second I had the clear, stupid thought that the window wasn't keeping us apart so much as holding us together, like a spine holds a back. Why us? I asked. He moved his mouth, not a smile, a shape like remembering. Then he lowered his hand and turned his head almost toward the door. He never tried it. But by standing where a knock lives, he changed the door. I could feel the knock he might make the way you feel a sneeze build. It never came. The waiting bruised. In daylight, I found not footprints, but a darker oval in the grass, as if patience could seep. We named him, because you can carry what you can name. Rosie called him Window Man. I called him the Waiting. Naming carved a small shape that fit us. We slept with the hall light on. We took turns pretending to be brave. We logged nights until the days looked like an ugly calendar of nothing with a few X's. 2 weeks after the first night, chalk covered the driveway, circles with lines through them like broken clocks. Rosie's hands were caked white. He wanted me to draw it, she said. She pointed to the biggest circle where she'd rubbed the chalk into a cloudy moon, so he can come inside without being not allowed. Rage came as a kind of mercy. It yanked my fear by the hair. We don't invite people, I told her too sharply. She flinched. I hosed the chalk away while the water ran milky to the gutter. At 2:03, I woke to blinds open in Rosie's room, to air that smelled briefly like rain. He's asking, she whispered. He's saying please. I stood between her and the window and leaned so close my breath made a sunless cloud. You can watch, I told the shape outside. That's all. Brave and foolish arrived together like stepping onto ice that looks thick. He lifted his fist to his chest and opened his hand, a gesture that might have meant hunger, apology, release. It felt practiced, then nothing. A night, 2, 3. The app sent moths and foxes and a kid crossing our lawn at dawn with a skateboard under his arm. The absence felt wrong, like a held note with no chord. On the 4th night, I went out and stood where he liked to stand. Seeing your home as a stranger does is like meeting your face in a store window. The crooked blind, the toy bin shadow, the line of glue where a pane cracked and we fixed it. The house didn't look vulnerable. It looked expectant. He came back on a Monday. Rosie slid into our bed and plucked at the sheet like a polite bellhop. He's back, she said, not scared, not happy, informational. The street light had burned out. Only our porch lit the scene. He stood in its spill like a man in a photo booth. If he had a face, it was an idea of one. He raised his hand to the glass and I saw it. Not features, but reflection. My hand hovered over his. The pane breathed between. He left before the cruiser turned the corner. He always would. He wasn't there to be caught. He was there to learn. The police stopped coming unless we pressed. The neighbors installed lights so bright their houses looked like showrooms. We kept logging until the entries were just dates and the word nothing. Sometimes he came. Sometimes he didn't. He never crossed the threshold. He never broke the glass. He never tried a lock. He didn't need to. Weeks later, Rosie ran a fever. Drifting, she stared at the ceiling and said, as mildly as if pointing out a cloud, he wasn't waving back at me. He was practicing my wave. I asked what that meant. She shrugged that small shrug that says you're asking a big question of a little person. He wanted to get it right, she said, and slept with her palm open like proof. In November, we moved 3 blocks over to a duplex that faces a different direction. New locks, new camera, a porch light bright enough to bleach the driveway. The first night, nothing. Second, nothing. On the 3rd, the app flagged a face. I sat up too fast. It was only the reflection of a pale welcome balloon bobbing in the window. I laughed too hard and still went to look at the dark. Every window changes what it shows. This one shows a tree with leaves like wet coins, a neighbor who leaves early, a square of sky that looks bruised and healing. Some nights, between 2 and 3, the house grows heavier, as if someone presses a calm hand to the glass from the other side. I lie still. I do not wave. I think about thresholds, how they aren't lines so much as habits, and how habits, kept long enough, become invitations. If you want me to say he was caught or identified, or that there was a reason you could fix with a new deadbolt, you won't like what I learned. The truth isn't a knock. It's the silence where a knock could go, the knowing that glass is thin and lawns remember. I didn't notice the creaks at first. Out here, wood talks the way old men do, slow, proud, mostly about the weather. Our farmhouse sits a few miles outside Waco, a squat square with a porch facing fields. At night, every small sound becomes the only sound. So when the back steps sighed, I told Elaine it was the house stretching. She rolled toward me, hair in her eyes, and said, "Even boards need rest." We went back to being the kind of people who believed in harmless noises. Routine fenced our days. I fed the cat, tightened the gate latch that liked to wander, checked the rain gauge like it owed me an explanation. Elaine clipped tomatoes and lectured hornworms with a mercy I never learned. Evenings we watched a show we didn't mention at church, then she read and I pretended to plan elaborate meals. The first oddness wasn't sound. It was a smell, cigarette smoke, faint as a whisper threading through the screen. Neither of us smoked. Elaine quit in a summer that's faded in photographs. This wasn't hers anyway. It carried a glove box tang, hot and stale. I stood at the doorway, listening past crickets and distant highway, and pictured someone standing just outside our lives, enjoying our breeze. "Raccoons," I said. "Raccoons don't smoke." 2 mornings later, I found the boot prints. 4 ovals of dried mud on the back steps, heavy enough to hold shape, direct as a sentence. 1, 2, 3, 4, then nothing. The last print stopped at the kitchen window, as if the man had stepped into the glass and disappeared. I fetched my tape measure because numbers feel like control. The stride was long. "Calm," said a part of me that sounded nothing like me. "Call Harlan," Elaine said, meaning the deputy with the polite smile that makes bad news sound tidy. He came with dust on his SUV and a pamphlet about raccoons. He studied the steps, tipped his hat, and said, "Lot of animals out this way." "The kind that shop for boots?" I asked. He apologized and promised extra patrols. That night we slept with the phone on the nightstand and the porch light drawing a circle. 2 nights later, the porch light went dead. Not blown. Unscrewed half a turn, the bulb hanging shy of contact like a tooth working itself loose. I twisted it back in with a hand I tried to keep steady. The steps answered with a thin, testing weight, like a question asked in a room where no one feels safe saying yes. Our cat planted herself in the doorway and would not cross the threshold. Elaine set her book down without finding the ribbon. We pretended the air hadn't changed. You learn the country isn't just distance on a map, it's distance in time. Between the moment you know something is wrong and the moment anyone else can help, a whole other life can pass. I tied 3 little bells to the middle step so we'd hear if a raccoon fine came up. I left a hammer under a dish towel and said I'd brought it in to oil the hinge. Elaine turned the phone volume up and pretended her book had gotten better. When he exhaled against the screen, the mesh trembled like skin. That soft human breath turned the doorway into a cheek. "Hear that?" I whispered. "I hear you," Elaine said, and I didn't know which you she meant. I stood with my hand on the knob and felt cold through the metal, like fingers matching mine on the other side. I didn't open. I counted to 30, then 30 again. When I pulled the door, the yard was a black ocean and the porch light our weak moon and nothing else. We bought a camera, the kind that turns night into a greenish bad dream. It showed fox, wind, a neighbor's cat. For 2 nights, the steps were quiet enough. On the 3rd, I woke to the wrong kind of silence and saw the camera staring at siding. He'd turned it by hand. The screws weren't stripped. Over breakfast, Elaine said, "Remember the O'Neills? They moved after a man kept showing at their windows." She told me it wasn't the seeing that broke her. It was the not seeing after, the waiting. We read each other's faces like a line you check twice. I bought locks I didn't trust and motion lights that punish moths. The hardware clerk didn't look up. "Batteries?" he said. The Tuesday it turned, the smoke didn't sneak. It entered like someone with a key. It filled the kitchen and sat down. Tap, came the sound on the glass, as polite as a neighbor with a covered dish. Elaine placed her book down as if the air could bruise. Tap. I told myself I'd wait for the next tap, then open fast. Tap. I flung the door. The motion light poured white over the yard and made a stage of our grass. He was already withdrawing, casual, walking backward into the dark with the easy confidence of someone who knows the scene better than the actors. Hat brim low, coat too long for the season, the cigarette a small star. He lifted 2 fingers in a small salute. "Hey," I said, and my voice sounded borrowed from a smaller man. He turned when the light clicked off and became a thickness in the dark. Harlan found a shine on the fence where a hand had touched too often and a flattened circle of grass at the property line. A seat made by habit. "He's comfortable," Harlan said. He didn't mean it for comfort at all. "We'll keep an eye." An eye is one, I thought. And the dark has so many. The next morning, the fingerprints were already there. 5 pads pressed in dew from the inside, long ovals like bruises on glass. My hand didn't match. His fingers were a little longer, a little narrower, as if the hand had been designed to touch exactly where fear lives. "We can't live like this," Elaine said. "We are," I said. That wasn't courage. It was inventory. Advice comes like feed store slogans. Get a dog, get a gun, get gone. Dogs need years. Guns need decisions I don't trust at 3 a.m. And leaving felt like admitting the man at our window knew us better than we knew ourselves. I wrote a note on an index card and taped it inside the screen. "We see you. We know your face. We will call." It felt like stacking words into a fence. In the morning, the tape was there and the paper wasn't. On the top step lay a cigarette butt and a match that had burned halfway and died, the ash clinging like frost. Church offered forgiveness like a dare. We went early to miss conversation and ended up with it anyway. A teenager said her mother loved our tomatoes. The ordinary washed over us, sweet as a hymn. We brought a pie to the station because that's how country people apologize for unsolved things. Harlan told us about patrol patterns and not opening the door. I promised something I'd already broken. Home felt scraped thin. The screen hung open just enough that the latch tongue pressed the strike without falling in. On the inside of the kitchen window, drawn through a film of our breath, was a single vertical line. I wiped it away and it returned that night, the same length, the same steady meanness. Like a mark on a door jamb nobody asked for. We started sleeping in shifts, one reading with the porch light blazing while the other chased a handful of minutes. You'd be amazed what a person can love at 3 a.m. Clock tick, refrigerator hum, the honesty of appliances. The steps learned our rhythm. Sometimes they creaked just enough to hook a heartbeat. Sometimes they kept the slow sway you hear at a dock, a boat touching and touching. The bells didn't ring. Whatever he was, he moved between them. 2 nights before we decided to leave, the creaks counted. 1. Pause. 2. Longer pause. 3. The deliberate wait made the whole house feel numbered. I realized he wasn't trying to get in. He was measuring us, not our locks or lights, but the space in us his presence had claimed. There's a kind of theft where nothing is taken and you still have less. We signed papers for a small apartment in town where neighbors knock by accident because walls are thin. Relief travels faster than fear. Friends used words like transition and next chapter. On our last afternoon, I sat on those steps and smoked one of his brand from the bag, just to see if taste matched smell. It did, hot rubber and old summer. I pressed the ember out between my fingers, left the butt beside his and stood up slowly, like I might tip the house if I rose too fast. We moved boxes through a door that opens onto a hallway where other lives brush past ours. City sounds moved in. A baby testing lungs, a TV narrating strangers, a violin that might be practice or crying. We missed the field and we didn't. Noise can be a blanket if you've been cold long enough. Now and then, just as sleep begins to thin the day into forgiving shapes, I feel the lightest draft lift the edge of the bedspread. A building breathes like a farmhouse. Pipes tick the way crickets used to. Someone down the hall lights a cigarette and the smell moves like a rumor through vents. I breathe slow, count to 30. The quiet between creaks here is different. It's full of people I could call by name if I knew their names. On the kitchen window above our new sink, the condensation rolls according to city physics. Still, I keep a finger ready. If a line appears, I won't wipe it. I'll leave it like an instruction, a measure of something I'm done pretending I can count. We didn't bring the house or field or the wide black yard, but the shape of listening comes anywhere you go. Some nights I dream I'm back on the porch holding the bulb so the light stays. and the step beneath me gives a quiet, patient answer. We didn't lose the house. We unplugged it from us. If he stands now at someone else's screen, smokes and turns cameras toward siding, I don't wish him harm. I wish him distance enough that he shrinks to a dot you can blame on your eyes. Most nights the city keeps me. Some nights when the draft lifts and the room goes very attentive, I lie still and hear an old habit returning. A patient weight settling on steps I can't see, counting softly in a voice that isn't mine. 1, 2, 3. I used to think our Texas cul-de-sac was the safest place on earth. Sprinklers ticking like metronomes, the air warm with cut grass and drier sheets. After my wife moved out, I told my son Jamie that normal would be our project. Homework at the table, pizza on Fridays, porch light like a lighthouse. I worked days at the tire shop off 35 and evenings felt measured and harmless. Normal, I decided, was a sound. The hum of the fridge, the soft clack of the thermostat, the ball game low on TV. Across the thin wooden fence, one window never closed its eyes. I don't mean daylight with blinds pulled for sun. I mean 2 in the morning when I'd pad to the sink for water and glance out, and there he'd be, framed square in his own glass, a pale face in a syrupy old bulb glow. He stood so still he made the room around him look painted that way. I raised a hand once. He didn't move. From that distance, his eyes red as coins. Jamie rinsed his cereal beside me. "You waving at the Joneses?" he said. Because every name on our row was a Jones or a Smith, and it made the world feel standard issue. "Just being neighborly," I said, and tried again. Nothing. That night I dreamed of a store window that pressed back when I leaned into it. I woke to the sprinklers rattle and checked without meaning to. The man was there. It felt like he had not blinked since I last looked. After that, noticing him became a habit with teeth. Morning there. Dusk there. Spaghetti on the stove. There, the same posture, the same amber light, too warm for a kitchen. When we ate, Jamie chose the chair that kept his back to our glass. "He gives me the creeps," he said. "He probably works nights," I told him. "He's zoning out." Jamie shook his head. "He doesn't blink. Saturdays I mowed the strip by the fence. Knotholes lined up like peepholes if you crouched. I didn't crouch, but the thought put a pressure on my neck. When the mower died, the quiet felt loud. Cicadas high and dry. A truck coughing at the stop sign. The steady hum from the neighbor's window like a toothache. I could be 30 feet from a person and not know one true thing about him. The first note arrived folded under our doormat. "You should close your curtains at night." I laughed it off. The second was wrapped around our mailbox flag with a rubber band. "Some people watch who watch." I threw it out, then dug it from the trash and slipped it into the junk drawer because throwing it away felt like signing a contract I hadn't read. A city cruiser idled in front of the house across the fence a week later. The officer walked the perimeter, wrote something, and went. That afternoon, a paper flapped from the neighbor's doorknob like a white tongue. Guilt leaked into the fear. What if the man needed help? What if I'd been waving at a situation, not a person? That night, a storm shouldered in and knocked out our power. Without our lamps, the only light on the street was that window. It burned like a ship lantern. The house felt muffled and camp-like. The air loosened without the AC. Jamie fell asleep on the couch. I sat at the table and listened to the sink tick. The neighbor's light didn't flicker. I don't remember deciding to go. I remember the slick cold of the back door knob and wet grass darkening my shoes. Up close, the paper on the neighbor's doorknob had soaked to gray pulp. The knob turned under my hand. The door opened. Dust had learned how to stand inside that house. A single lamp sat on the floor, no shade. The bulb's syrupy glow bruising the corners. "Hello?" My voice sounded used up. The living room wasn't tidy. It was empty, like a rental nobody had staged. Outlets gaped without covers. The kitchen was a suggestion. Cabinet frames without doors, a fridge-shaped absence where a fridge should go. A black wreath of dead flies on linoleum. In the bathroom, a webbed mirror offered me a face already cracked. On the counter lay 3 things. A stack of folded notes like the ones we'd received, an old brass key, and a Polaroid face down. I flipped the photo and saw my own kitchen window, blinds half open. Inside, Jamie sat at the table with homework, head bent. My reflection was a smear behind him. The date printed at the bottom was last spring before my wife left. My throat pinched. I said his name into the emptiness. The house answered with a thump from deeper in, as if a held breath had been dropped. At the end of the hall, a square of light framed another window. Through it, I could see our kitchen across the fence, and in the glass, a dark human shape. I took a step. The shape took one too, lagging by a beat. It was me. All those nights he had been a reflection learning the trick of being human. Or I had been a human learning the trick of being a reflection. The bulb brightened. Somewhere the neighborhood exhaled. Footsteps clacked on the porch. "Code enforcement," a voice called. A man in a polo with a clipboard peered past me. "Sir, you can't be in there. Property's condemned. Been vacant since January." He pointed to a notice stapled to the jamb, rain wrinkled. "Owner died inside. Family let the place go. We're scheduling a demo." He squinted. "You all right? You look like you saw a ghost." I stared through him at my kitchen window, which looked back. A frame containing a man I recognized only by the way he stood where I always stand. I locked our door twice that night. I checked on Jamie. He'd migrated to my bed and curled around the dent my body makes. At 2 I got up because 2 is the hour that thins the world. The neighbor's lamp still burned. The room remained a stage with no actors. Then slowly, in the center of the window, a face appeared, where there was no body to carry it. Coin-bright eyes first, then a suggestion of cheek, as if the glass were remembering someone. I killed our lights. In the dark, both houses held their breath. The note stopped. The feeling didn't. Twice I found the front door unlocked in the morning. Once I found a wet ring from a glass on the table, perfectly centered. On Monday, a kid on a bicycle asked if anyone lived in the condemned place. "No one," I said too fast. He nodded. "My sister says if you look too long, you leave a copy in the window," he said, and rode off with my heart in his back pocket. 2 days later, a new paper went up. Notice of demolition. I read it while the late sun turned the empty rooms honey-colored. I couldn't stop myself from pressing my palm to the glass. For a second, my reflection aligned so cleanly that it looked like a person inside was trying the same trick. Behind my shape, something rippled like heat. I told myself light does odd things in vacant rooms. The demo crew came on Thursday. Jamie watched from the porch with a blue popsicle. The backhoe's first punch folded the roof with a cough. Drywall went to powder that drifted over our yard like off-brand snow. The window shattered last, a spiderweb first, then a sound like river ice giving way. The air filled with glitter. I expected relief. What I felt was subtraction, as if the thing that had watched simply stepped sideways into the space the house used to occupy. That night, Jamie called softly from bed. "Dad? There's someone by the fence." I crossed his room slow, rehearsing lines about shadows and trees and the wind. The yard was a blank square of night. The fence was only a drawn line. In the black pane of our own window, though, 2 pairs of eyes floated. One set was mine, stretched long by angle. The other sat coin-bright and patient exactly where the condemned house had been. They did not blink. At breakfast, I tried to rewrite reality with chores. I packed lunches, coiled the hose, wiped the counter. In the bird bath, a Post-it floated inside a sandwich bag. The ink puckered from water. "You're in the wrong house," it said in the same tidy hand. I kept it, of course. I keep all of them, as if the drawer were a mouth that could chew the problem. The demolition left a rectangle of dirt across the fence, an absence that caught evening like a bowl. Jamie asked if we could plant sunflowers there. "Sure," I said, picturing stalks taller than the fence like sentries. A city truck idled and a man pounded a stake at the lot's corner with an orange flag. He waved, I waved back. It felt like waving to a lighthouse keeper who had finally come up the stairs. Late, I sat at the table with the TV off, letting the house balance on its true sounds. The fridge sighed. The water heater shifted. From the void where the other house had been, wind sifted through fence slats with a long shush. Something tapped the glass, polite like a nail on a jar. Jamie twitched awake on the couch. We both turned our heads. Nothing waited. Then the tapping came again from behind us at the sliding door. A new Post-it glowed there. "You're doing a good job," it said. For a second, foolish pride warmed me. A dad needs praise like anybody else. Then I saw, pressed faintly into the paper's corner, the mirror print of the line from the sheet above, an impression left by a hard hand. "You're in the wrong house." I held it in the kitchen's amber light and felt the sentence turn in my palm like a key. The wrong house. Which of us had wandered into which window? Which glass had learned which name? I try not to look, but the window lives like an itch. Across the fence is a square of vacancy that should be harmless. Our reflection sits in it anyway, learning how to stand. Some nights I see only myself, tired, a man rebuilding a life with the wrong tools. Some nights there is a second face laid over mine like tracing paper. It has coin-bright eyes and the patience of bulbs that never burn out. It waits where safety should feel most ordinary. It waits for me to look long enough to leave something of myself behind. I used to say the nicest sound in our house was the dryer humming after dinner. Like the place was purring because it was full of socks, of kid noise, of us. On ordinary nights, I'd wash the dishes while the Spurs murmured from the living room and the twins, Danny and Luca, negotiated for 10 more minutes, like lawyers who'd missed their calling. The dog, Pepper, would camp under the table for fallen crumbs. It was a small lived-in place on the northwest side of San Antonio, a 70s ranch with a swayback roof and just enough yard for a pecan tree and a plastic pool. You learn a house's little language. The front step squeaks when it's humid. The bathroom door sticks if you don't lift while you turn. The attic complains when you pull the cord. That night I learned there was a new word in our language, and it wasn't a word I wanted. It started like this: a scratch above the laundry room while I was pulling shirts from the dryer. Not a scamper like a lizard or a thump like a branch. This was slow, testing, as if a fingernail were writing something on the other side of the ceiling. I told Maria it was squirrels. She said, or raccoons, and her face did that half-joke, half-don't-you-dare look. We laughed because laughing is cheaper than worry. I promised to check it out after bedtime. San Antonio nights hold heat the way the Riverwalk keeps tourists, reluctantly letting go. The attic hatch was in the hall. I tugged the cord and that cutout square of ceiling dropped with a dry cough of dust. The aluminum ladder jittered like an old man's knees. Up there the air is cedar pollen and fiberglass, the kind that prickles your wrists even after you shower. My flashlight turned the pale pink insulation oceans into dunes. I swept the beam left and right, expecting the quick wink of a tail or the smear of droppings. Instead, the light picked out a rectangle of shadow near the eaves that wasn't shadow at all. A blanket rolled tight. Beside it, a grocery sack from H-E-B crumpled into a pillow shape. Empty water bottles. A Whataburger bag folded flat and smoothed like someone kept it respectful. There were food wrappers, ramen bricks with the seasoning packets missing, a line of sunflower seed shells like punctuation marks. Every hair on my arm stood up in the heat. Squirrels don't drink bottled water. Raccoons don't fold their trash. I heard my name below. Javi? Maria's voice wobbled. The ladder rattled when I descended too fast. I didn't say anything at first because words have a way of making a thing real. I showed her instead. The bag I'd grabbed on instinct, the plastic labels, the wrapper with greasy fingerprints. She said very calm, "The kids are sleeping." Then she said, "Call someone." The officer who came out was maybe a couple years older than me. Kind eyes and a bored pen. He took a look with his mag light and nodded like he'd expected as much. "It happens," he said, "especially with older houses. Folks see a ladder, truth be told." He suggested we change the garage keypad, check the windows, consider a camera. He said if we hadn't noticed anything missing, the person was probably transient, in and out. "Spooked now," he added. "You found their nest." We changed the keypad and the locks. I screwed a battery camera under the eave and another in the hallway ceiling facing the attic hatch. I told myself it was done. I told myself the sound I heard the next night, another scratch, was house settling, heat and wood arguing about who owned the beams. But sleep is a thing with a handle, and once fear gets its fingers around it, you can pull and that door won't open. 2 nights later, Pepper growled at a wall. Not barked. Growled, low and constant, eyes up at the vent. She hears everything, Maria said, but her voice kept the lights on. We turned on the TV too loud, as if volume could plug holes. The twins were oblivious. That's their magic. They watched a cartoon and laughed and left their little socks everywhere like a breadcrumb trail back to safety. When they were asleep, I went up again. The attic gave the little whine it always gives, but it felt like a mouth this time. I took more than a look. I wriggled on my belly toward the far eave. The rolled blanket had been unrolled and re-rolled. You can tell by the crease. The H-E-B sack was gone. In its place, tucked behind a beam, was a notebook. Plain black cover. The first page had our last name written in block letters, Ortega. hard enough to press dents into the sheet beneath. The second page had sketches of rectangles, rooms, my room, the kids' room with a cratered circle that could only be the glow-in-the-dark moon sticker above their beds. The next pages were names, my name, Maria's, the kids. It hurt to see them spelled right. There were arrows, little notes in tidy lowercase that felt like whispers. Comes home 5:30. Dog barks at ice. Light dead above garage. Girl sleeps left side. Boy kicks off covers. Woman hums when she cooks. I put the notebook back exactly where I found it. It took everything I had not to hurl it into the insulation like a grenade. On my belly in that hot pink sea, my breath came too loud and I tried to make my bones smaller. I turned off the flashlight to listen. If you want to know the shape of your fear, turn off the light that lets you see it. In the absence of the beam, I heard it right away, a patient rasp. Not near the hatch. Not by the eave. In the wall. A line, a fingernail trying its letters. We didn't tell the kids. We did tell my brother. Crash with us, Louis said. I got the pullout. But you say no because your whole life is here, the toothbrushes and homework and cereal bowls. We started sleeping with the hall light on. Maria put a chair under the attic hatch like that would matter. I moved Pepper's bed to the hall. The camera pinged motion at 2:12 a.m., and when I checked, I saw a shape slide over the lens for half a second, the way a moth smears a streetlight. In the morning, that camera was gone. Not corroded, not fallen. The screws were stacked neatly on the little lip of molding like a set of coins. The officer came again. He saw the notebook, the stacked screws, the clean absence where my camera used to be. He tugged his belt and tried kindness. We can patrol, he said. I can do that. He told us to consider a hotel for a couple nights. Sometimes they lose interest if they can't depend on the pattern. Patterns are what you have when everything else is chaos. We packed duffels and told the kids it was a vacation. The twins cheered because they're 6 and a pool makes everything okay. At the hotel, the air conditioner had that strong hotel smell, like a promise of clean. We all slept too hard. At breakfast, Danny asked where Pepper was and started to cry before she finished the question. Pepper was with Luis, who sent a picture of her on his couch with a caption, "Guarding everybody." Maria and I decided we'd go back during the day, grab more things, talk to our landlord about the roof and the hatch and whether there'd ever been anything. When we opened the front door, the house smelled wrong. Not bad, not like rot, like soap. Cheap cologne cut with sweat. The hall light that we'd left on was off. There was a shadow too sharp in the living room, as if something big had been moved. My heart did that hummingbird trick. I took a step and heard the softest scrape above me. Not a scamper, a repositioning. The twin of the sound a person makes when they decide they will not cough. I didn't go up. I called. The officer's voice took a new tone. 15 minutes later, there were 2 of them. They went up with more noise than I'd ever dared make. Boards creaking, one of them cussing when fiberglass found his sleeves. They came down flushed and empty-handed. If he was here, he's not now. He pointed to new scuffs by the eave. There's space that runs over the hallway ceiling into the garage soffit. If he knew the routes better than we do, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. He looked at me like a guy at H-E-B trying to recommend the thing he would buy if he were me. You should consider staying with family a bit. Let us keep eyes on it. We stayed with Luis. The first night the house texted us, motion detected, because I had forgotten to disable one of the apps. The clip showed a ceiling fan turning lazily, though we'd left it off. In the frame down at the far right, you could see Pepper's bed. It had been nudged 6 inches toward the hall. You tell yourself you're seeing lines that aren't there. You tell yourself 100 lies because they're easier to carry. When we went back the next afternoon, there were little messages. An apple on the kitchen counter with a single bite taken. One of Danny's hair ties looped around the cabinet knob. In the hallway where the light throws a crescent on the carpet, there was a small pile of fine dust, just a finger's worth, as if someone had drilled something tiny. I looked up and saw it, a pinhole in the drywall. I crouched and followed where it would point. The angle met the bathroom door. On the other side, there's a mirror. I don't remember dropping the bag, but I remember the sound it made, like a punctured thing. I called the landlord because you're supposed to do things in order. He said, never had anything like that in 30 years, which didn't help, and then I can get someone out to check the roof. As if the problem were shingles. As if weather were the intruder. That night at Luis's, I lay on his couch and listened to a house that wasn't mine. His fridge made different knocks. His AC had a different wheeze. Around 3:11 I woke anyway. Like your body keeps appointments you never agreed to. The quiet felt like the pause between two words. I got up and stood under the vent, which is madness, and yet there I was. It's hard to explain what I heard. It was not the sound of someone moving. It was the sound of someone refusing to move. In the morning, the officer called. "We found something," he said. A nest of blankets had been tucked deeper, beyond the eave into that narrow crawl where you have to exhale just to slide. There was a toothbrush, a bottle of water half full, another notebook, this one with fewer drawings and more words. Not a diary exactly, more like lists. "He calls you the tall one," the officer said. "He calls your wife the sweet singer. He calls the kids." He stopped. "You don't want that part. We bagged it, we didn't go back after that. We broke our lease. The landlord kept the deposit. He had a clause for damages, and I didn't have the energy to argue that the damage was not measured in dollars. We found a place near Leon Valley, a second-floor unit with new paint and a balcony that looks at the tops of oaks. The kids took to it like kids do. New adventure. Pepper patrols like it's what she was born for. Maria hums when she cooks. Some things cling on. If a story wants to hold you, it finds ways. Weeks later, I was sorting boxes in the new place, cutting tape, hauling our past out into the light. At the bottom of one, between a quilt and a stack of comic books, I found a single sheet of paper that didn't belong to us, plain white. Centered on it, in tidy lowercase, was a sentence. "Your ladder is different here." No signature. No smudges. The kind of clean that smells like soap. I didn't show it to Maria. I folded it once and slid it into the back of the junk drawer under rubber bands and unmatched batteries. That night, around 3:11, I woke and lay still, telling myself it was the old habit, that time in your bones like dust in the lungs. The apartment has a different language. The fridge clicks when it cycles. The upstairs neighbor walks like he's always late. The AC hums like it's pleased with the job. I listened to all of it, and still, under all of it, I waited for the other sound. The patient rasp of a thought being written on the other side of the ceiling. Pepper raised her head and stared at the vent. I told myself she was dreaming. I told myself 100 easy things. In the morning, when we opened the balcony door, a pecan shell lay on the doormat, split clean in two, its halves arranged like a pair of attentive ears. The twins laughed and said a squirrel left us breakfast. "Probably," I said. I meant it with all my strength. Still, when I looked up at the corner where the wall meets the ceiling, a tiny crescent of dust glowed gold in the sun, like the tick of a pencil that had just lifted, and all at once I remembered the single neat sentence, and the way the officer's pen had moved when he wrote our names, and the weight of a folded blanket in the dark, and how houses learn you even as you're learning them. Somewhere, a ladder waits to be pulled. Somewhere, a hand that has practiced being still is writing its next sound. I always liked the house best in the rain. The gutters gurgled, the live oaks hissed, and the air in the vents fell into a sleepy hum that made every corner seem honest. On Saturdays, Mom's shift ran late at the hospital, and Dad had been gone long enough to slide from excuse to biography. So it was usually just me. Homework on the dining table and the old landline we kept for hurricanes glowing like a nightlight. It rang. That was the first strange thing. No one ever called the house. I hit speaker. "Hello?" "You in residence," Static answered, a thin hiss with a mouth in it. I waited. "Mom," I said, "because that's what you say to empty lines." A soft click. Dead. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Unknown caller. Zeros across the screen like a joke someone forgot to finish. I lifted the handset. Breathing. Ordinary, human, not gross or prankish, just there, as if a person was turned sideways to the receiver and listening. The call dropped. I set the phone down gently and then, guilty, set it down again like arranging it could calm it. The third call came with an echo. The chime hit the kitchen, then returned thinner from somewhere deeper in the house, a half-beat behind. I stood, chair legs rasping tile. The storm shook the window with rice handfuls of rain. On the fourth ring, I realized the echo wasn't an acoustic trick. The phone on the table was ringing, and something else, faint inside, was ringing with it. I answered too brightly. Okay, not funny, nothing. But beneath the silence stretched thin as piano wire hit a second dial tone. The line cut. The echo kept ringing 2 beats more, shy and late. We bought the place when I was 8, a long one-story with a tacked-on back room that made the roof look like it was shrugging. Mom called it a good deal for the bones, by which she meant the weird closets, the half-finished office, and the knee-wall crawl space that ran behind 3 rooms like a secret hallway. The realtor pointed out the landline jacks with a flourish, as if quaint wiring was a feature. We never used them, until storms reminded us why old tools survive. The next call showed our number. The screen said home. "Hello?" I asked, and my voice returned to me thin and delayed like the house had recorded it and pressed play. I hung up hard, then told myself I'd imagined the echo. I walked the hall anyway, holding the handset against my chest. The office door exhaled cool air that smelled like dust and dryer sheets. I clicked on the lamp and stood among boxes. The house rang again, outside my hand now, from behind the office wall through wood. Beep, beep. I knelt at the baseboard door to the crawl space, a little panel the previous owner left half-screwed shut. I put my ear to it. The second ring was definitely there, small and late, like a child trying to keep step. I didn't open it. I texted Mom, weird calls, prob spam, all good. Which was the truth, halved and polished. The landline kept up its stubborn rhythm until the answering machine, a relic with a cheerful robot voice, took over. Please leave a message after the tone. Whoever it was breathed at the beep and hung up. Then the knock came, a polite knuckle at the back door. The second knock arrived faster, a question growing teeth. I picked up Mom's kitchen knife because there are rituals you honor, even when you don't believe in them, and peered through the peephole. A girl about my age stood hunched on the porch in a wet hoodie, hair strung with rain. She looked ordinary, that was the worst part. "Hi," she said, not shouting, just steady. "I'm lost. My phone died. Could you call a ride for me?" Behind me, the landline rang, and from the crawlspace door, the faint, late ring tried to keep up. The girl glanced at the timing and almost smiled. "I'll call," I said. "Tell me the number." She stared at the wood like she could hear through it. "I don't remember," she said. "Could I just come in and—" "No," I said, surprised by how clean the word felt. "You can't." "Okay." She nodded, accepting rules we hadn't spoken. "I'll be around." She stepped into the rain and walked away without checking if I'd watch. I did. I called 911 and gave the shortest, honest version. There's someone either in my house or using my house, and there's a second phone line in the walls. The dispatcher asked me to stay on. I stayed on. "Officers are en route," she said, putting a shape around my fear. Before they arrived, the ringing stopped. The crawlspace went patient. Small clicks announced themselves here and there, like the house changing positions in sleep. 2 soaked officers with polite eyes went room to room. They found the panel. They found the phone, a beige plastic fossil mounted 6 feet inside the crawl, its tiny red light on. The cord ran over a beam and down behind the guest room dresser, and into a dusty junction box in the laundry room, where the second line had been piggybacked years. A lot of these old places had extras, the younger officer said. Fax machines, modems. Somebody probably forgot. Creepy, sure, but not a crime. The older one leaned on the doorframe and used the voice you save for kids who have every right to be scared. "Sometimes folks use what's already there," he said. "You hear any footsteps, doors? See anyone besides the girl?" "Sometimes," I said, and his face made a small private decision. Mom came home in wet scrubs. She put her hand on my neck and held it there the way you anchor photographs to refrigerators. "We'll have it pulled tomorrow," she said. That night I slept in her room with the TV playing a show where everyone knows who did it, except the characters. I dreamed the girl stood at the curb dialing a phone that didn't have buttons, waiting for a ring that came from everywhere and answered nowhere. The repairman arrived after breakfast with a toolbox that had family air. He crawled, unscrewed, clipped. He came back holding the little beige phone like a delicate bird. "Dead as disco now," he said. Second line was old. Someone tied it separate, maybe for a fax. Been here longer than both of us. I'll cap it off. He wound the wire into his bag. "No more ghost rings, boss. We believed him until night." The storm passed. The sky sagged Houston yellow. Mom fell asleep to a show about autopsies and arguments. I returned to my geometry because triangles don't negotiate. At 9:30, the vents took a breath and the landline rang. Plain and bright, like nothing bad had ever happened to a sound. I answered. Silence. Then my voice, small and paper-thin, asked, "Who is this?" I set the handset down like I was tucking in a child and walked to the office. The crawl space was clean. No phone, no wire. But the dark had a pressure, a dial tone you couldn't hear, Only feel, the way you feel thunder before it speaks. On the baseboard wood, half-moon dents nested where fingers had pressed over years. I pressed mine in and felt them fit. It would be cooler, more respectable to say the police caught someone living between our walls, that the girl was bait and the phone was a lure. It would be comforting to say the wires carried a neighbor's mischief, or some modern hack riding old copper. We have reports, a repair ticket, and a beige phone in a plastic bin to wave at doubt. But what I know lives in my house can't be signed for. A second line threaded through the bones, a breath that borrows the weather. A habit that doesn't realize it's breathing. I made a rule. If the phone rings after 9, I don't answer. Most nights are quiet. Some nights a phantom chime rises from the walls and smooths my hair at the nape. A guilty hand. Twice the back door took polite knocks. Twice a girl's voice asked if I could call her a ride. I told her no, and she said okay with the calm of someone who already knows the answer. When the porch light sketched her face, she was always exactly the kind of person you let in. Tonight the sky is low and the vents are practicing how to breathe September. Mom is asleep. The neighbor's dog barks once like a curse and then apologizes to the dark. On the table, the geometry book is open to a proof that smirks at me. The landline sits in its cradle like a quiet bird. Somewhere between the walls a decision is being made, a ring winding itself into a sound. If it comes, it will arrive ordinary like everything else that ever ruined a life. And if it doesn't, I will keep listening because the listening is how you stay safe and how you get caught. You pick up or you don't, and either way, the other line already knows your number. I've been driving long enough to know a blown tire from a bad road by the way the sound sits in my spine. Night highway is second home, diesel is proof I'm awake. I was hauling frozen poultry east along I-40, the panhandle flat as a dark ocean with one string of light through it. Amarillo by noon, drop coffee, turn around. Routine, the kind that makes you sloppy if you let it. The rest stop at 3 a.m. was 2 buzzing lamps, a squat brick building, a picnic table chewed by initials, and black pasture pressed to chain link. I rolled in and cut the engine. Only a tan sedan by the vending machines, windshield iced with bug ghosts. The wind tasted of dust and old sugar. Inside, fluorescent light turned the world the color of old teeth. 2 stalls, a rattling vent. When I stepped back into the corridor, I saw him, tall by the vending machines. Hands at his sides facing me like waiting was the job. Nothing illegal about him. Dark jacket, jeans, cap with a dead patch. It was the stillness that climbed my back. Evening, I said, or the hallway would decide whose story we were in. No answer. He watched the way a camera watches. I bought a Dr. Pepper to make standing there normal. The can thunked. In the glass, our reflections overlapped. My face a pale smear, his a dark cutout. His mouth hung a fraction open like a word was stuck there. I took my soda and walked out slow, hips level like I was carrying a bowl filled to the lip. Back in the cab, the dome light made a small cone. The world leaned against the glass outside it. I set an alarm and slid down until the wheel was only an arch. Sleep is a stray. It curls when it wants. I drifted into noises. Vent rattle, wind hiss, tires ticking as they cooled. Somewhere in that drift, a footstep touched the truck's skin, then nothing. I woke to silence that had been stirred. The sedan sat where it had been. Dawn hadn't picked a color. I glanced right. My heart did an old motor cough. He was inches outside the passenger window. No knock. Just there, face level with mine, separated by glass and dust. Up close, his eyes were pale gray-green. Vacancy more than color. Paper-dry skin. Patch turned to static. Mouth still parted. Freeze doesn't get enough credit. I became furniture. He watched with patient attention, counting slow. No smile, no tap, just looking like looking was the work, and he had clocked in. Can I help you? I tried, nothing. I thumbed the lock. Down already? The keys were in the ignition. One twist away, but I had a superstition about waking a motor under a gaze. I measured breaths and cataloged details. Loose thread on his cuff. A neat scar by his lip. A dark smear on his knuckle. Grease or dried blood. His breath fogged the glass in a slow rhythm that didn't match mine. After a while that belonged to no clock, he stepped back 2 inches. Then he slid out of view until the lamp swallowed him. Superstition cracked. I started the engine. I should have driven. Pride set my course. I told myself I'd circle once, keep my lights on him, make sure he wasn't heading for the driver's side, then go. He wasn't by the machines or the sedan or the table. My headlights combed the fence. For half a second I saw him beyond it, still as a scarecrow that had learned bone, but when the beams fixed the spot, only grass bowing to wind. I parked again because stupidity and routine are cousins. Coffee felt like armor. I grabbed my thermos. The bathroom door sighed. The vent sang its loose change song. I filled the thermos with liquid that only knew coffee by rumor. The smell was thin and brave. When I opened the door, he stood halfway between the building and my truck, turned toward the fence like he was listening to the pasture. First movement that felt chosen. I should have backed in and called 911. Instead, I said, "Hey." He turned his head just enough to prove he could. The brim cut his eyes into shade. "You okay?" The wind took it to the dark and brought back a thinner copy. He lifted his right hand very slowly and pointed past me over my shoulder. Pointing is an old human trick. It tugs your eyes like string. I looked. The door, the glow of my cab, fields on fields. Nothing. When I looked back, he was closer by 3 feet without any of the steps between. Coffee licked my wrist. "That's it," I said. I raised the thermos like a club. "I don't want trouble." He tipped his head the other way, as if trying the word on. His breath fogged once and a word came, or something dressed like one. Too soft and far, like a radio between stations. If I had to choose letters, wait, or wait, or way. The bathroom felt like a fortress because the lock turned and tile doesn't lie. I slid in, through the bolt, and got 911 with thumbs that didn't fit my hands. Mile marker, direction, man outside, not drunk, not a prank. The dispatcher's steady voice handed me courage. "Stay inside. Unit en route." Knocking came polite, 3 knuckles patient. "State trooper?" I asked, knowing it wasn't. Silence. Then a soft scrape. Paper sliding under the door. A white edge stopped halfway, like the beginning of a ticket. I didn't bend. Every muscle had the good sense my pride lacked. Blue-red finally washed the tile, reassurance thinned by fluorescent glare. I opened the door with the paper still there. The hallway was empty. The tan sedan waited like furniture. The trooper who walked in had tired eyes and a careful voice. She took my story straight, swept the place with her light, called out for anything that could be soothed by being called to. No one answered. She checked the sedan. Dust on the seats, no plates, registration pocket torn out. "Probably abandoned," she said. "People pass through," she added. "Dark makes them stranger. Doesn't always make them dangerous," said kindly, which made it worse. I wanted a roomer with a handle. "Get in your truck." "Doors locked. Drive until the sun's up. Don't stop off the interstate." I promised like a sinner. I rolled out steady. Her cruiser shrank. The fields took me back, his eyes in every green sign. The between stations word hiding in the tire hiss. Amarillo took the cargo and gave me sleep. New route home. I checked the cab as if a lost key could be found by staring. Then I remembered the paper under the bathroom door. I hadn't touched it. Shouldn't have mattered. But the image lay in my head with the same weight as his face. A white edge halfway waiting for a hand. I told myself prank and imagination and drove. I didn't stop at that rest area again. I chose plazas with diners and coffee that knew its name. For a while the world behaved. But something in me had shifted, subtle as a misaligned axle. In night mirrors I counted figures under lights. At empty ramps I watched for hats with unreadable patches. Pride put down its tools. Paranoia opened its drawer. Weeks later, in a different state, biology insisted. Another rest stop, another 3 a.m. Lamps with a different hum, pines instead of pasture. I came back to the cab easy, feeling like a man who had outlived a foolish scare. I set the cup down and glanced at the passenger window out of habit. An oval of fog hung there. Small at the height of a face I didn't own. No one stood outside. The lot was empty. The oval breathed once and thinned, as if shaped by a mouth no longer there. I wiped the glass with my sleeve. Clean. I told myself vent heat, wrong angle, glass sweats. Friendly lies one after the other. I pulled out and the oval rode with me a few seconds in the dark reflection, then vanished. The next night, nothing. The night after, the faintest bloom gone when I looked straight at it. You can train your eyes to see past what they fear. Maybe the thing learns where to stand. I think about the pointing more than the stare. That slow finger telling me to look behind me. I've replayed it 100 times. There is never anything there but a door I used, a truck I trust, and fields with no faces. Unless the thing he meant was the paper, I didn't take it. Sometimes when the radio dissolves into hiss and the road goes flat, I feel the weight of a sheet I never picked up. It feels thin and important. It feels like it says the same nearly word he breathed, inked dark enough to read. Wait. Or wait, or weigh. The difference is where you put the burden. I keep driving. Money to make, miles to end the day. Places meant for safety only promise help will find you eventually. They don't promise it'll get there first. Most nights the glass stays clean. Some nights it remembers a breath. I haven't seen the man again in the shape of a man. I've seen him in the habit of looking. And when the lamps hum and the fields press close, I catch myself watching back as if, somewhere between the buzz and the dark, he's pointing still. I tell people I like the graveyard shift because 3 a.m. is honest. Neon hums, bugs turn to punctuation on the lights, and the masks slide off. You pour coffee, keep the station tidy, and the city feels like a machine you know how to run. There was a man in the corner booth who never ordered. Trucker cap, black work jacket in all weather, big hands flat on the formica. If I lingered with the pot, he'd tip his chin like men do when nodding costs them something. I used to think he was waiting for someone. Then I decided he was his own weather system, and stopped thinking about him at all. My walk home was 10 blocks of quiet streets and old houses with porches that had given up. I cut past the laundromat with the broken sign that only ever spelled OPE, past the tire shop where stray dogs breathed and blinked like little furnaces, under a mural of a blue heron whose eye followed you at night. My apartment sat over a nail salon and always smelled like acetone trying to be flowers. The night it started, a storm had just wrung itself out. The air felt steamed and sour. The corner man came in and sat like always, hands on the table, cap low. I wiped rings, refilled mugs, counted the drawer. Every time I looked up, I found my eyes on him as if there were thread between us. When we closed, the lot was empty except for the security light buzzing like a loose filling. I locked the door twice, then a third time because anxiety wants ritual. 2 blocks from the diner, I heard boots behind me. Not quick, not shy, just steady weight on wet grit. I lengthened my stride without looking back. The sound matched me. I told myself it was echo. The building's throwing me at myself. The dogs coughed behind the tire shop and my reflection slid across the OPE glass like a fish. When the boots stopped, I stopped. The night held its breath, the way kitchens do right after a plate breaks. I turned around. Empty street. Moths haloing a lamp, a far train pulling a long note out of the air. My laugh came out thin and someone else's. When I turned back for home, the boots started again, closer now, so close I felt the vibration in my ankles. I put my hand on the pepper spray in my pocket and didn't pull it out. "Is somebody there?" I asked the dark. Denim whispered. Weight shifted. Silence closed like a door. At the chain link cut I used to shave a block, the boots jostled gravel in the gutter as if whoever wore them refused the sidewalk. On the other side, houses were close enough to hear televisions mumbling. One window showed a ball game paused, a pitcher frozen mid-arc, and I thought how a life can be reduced to that. A moment stretched past sense. The boots matched me to the corner mural, and then, as if I'd hit the edge of something, they moved ahead. Not following, leading, we walked. At my gate I slid the key in the swollen lock and felt the heat of the day still trapped in the metal. "Thank you," I said before I knew I would. The boots made one last slow scuff and were gone. I slept like a child who knows a bigger shape is awake in the house. In the morning the sound felt silly, like a bruise you poke to prove it's real. I swore I'd take a rideshare that night and then didn't because money. In the diner, the corner booth was full of noon light and a ring of dead bugs. The man came back after one, hands flat, brim down, and the thought came like a prank. Maybe he didn't order because he couldn't. "You see that guy?" I asked Benny, the cook, the next night. "The one who never orders?" Benny's face corkscrewed. "Honey, he's dead. Easter, bike on Telephone Road. Used to be a regular when Alma ran this place. Peach pie, talker, big tipper. You're thinking of someone else." He returned to his grill like he hadn't just moved the floor under my feet. I wanted to argue and didn't. People die all the time here, and the city keeps humming like a neon sign nobody knows how to switch off. When I locked up, I stood in the parking lot and waited. The security light buzzed. The lot smelled like fryer oil and rain. I walked without hurrying. When the first boot step sounded, I didn't speed up. I let it fall beside me like a second shadow. The stray dogs trotted ahead and checked corners for us. At the heron mural, the air cooled the way it does when someone opens a freezer. It smelled like wet canvas, like an empty booth by a window. The boots moved ahead a pace or two, then paused until I caught up. We crossed under the dead letters of the sign together. At my building, I touched the gate and said good night. In answer, the boots offered that small final scuff that felt like a nod. For 3 walks, the sound kept me company. Sometimes behind, sometimes to my side, sometimes scouting half a block ahead like a careful friend. On the 4th night, nothing. My own shoes, my own breath. The dogs didn't move. A kitchen television talked to itself, cheerful as a hostage. The quiet felt heavier than any footstep. I made it home and lay awake listening for the hallway to say my name, and it didn't. I learned something then. Fear can turn to comfort if you can predict its shape. The sound returned a week later like an apology you didn't know you needed. I caught myself slowing at the mural so it could draw even. At the gate, I nearly said thank you again and didn't, because I have rules about not talking to things I don't understand. You make rules when you survive on tips. You learn how to stay inside your lanes. All of this would have stayed a private superstition if not for Lena. She works a street over at the other diner, and we walk the same direction on different sidewalks like fish in twin aquariums. That night, her ponytail bobbed in and out of the streetlight islands ahead of me. I saw the moment her posture tightened. You can always tell when the walk stops being a walk. She glanced back and sped up. I heard it then. Boots behind her too, matching, unhurried, inexorable. Across the street, I said her name. She didn't hear me. She crossed at the mural corner without looking and caught her shirt on the loose twist in the fence. I ran. The boots ran too, only the sound was ahead of me now between us, chewing up the distance. Lena yanked free and stumbled. I reached her, and in that breath where 2 hearts try to become one noise, the boots made a wide circle around us and settled. Steady again, the way you'd pace off a safe boundary with your body. We stood there a long time, shaking and laughing and pretending we weren't. You heard it, she said finally. I thought I was losing it. Me too, I said. And because we are both poor, we didn't go looking for a reason. We went home. The boots walked until the gate and gave the scuff like a nod. After that, I started looking up motorcycle accidents on my phone during slow hours. Names and dates blurred. Easter had a handful. None mentioned peach pie. None wore a cap in the obituaries. It felt wrong to choose someone else's story and paste it on my fear just to make it neat. So I stopped. The man in the booth stayed dead or alive exactly as much as he needed to be. Some nights the boots don't come. Some nights they walk with me and then halfway down the block keep going without me. I'll stand still and listen to the sound recede into a place the map doesn't bother to name, and imagine other footsteps joining. Lighter, heavier, out of step. And it hits me that maybe the city has a whole second life that only wakes after we lock up. A patrol of ordinary ghosts who died on Tuesdays and kept their roots. Maybe the job you do longest is the one you do after you can't be paid for it anymore. Last week, close to dawn, the corner booth filled with a slant of blue light. For a moment I saw hands on the table, palms down, as if pinning the world to keep it from sliding away. Then the light shifted, and it was only the window in the parking lot and the security bulb buzzing like a trapped insect. I poured coffee for a nurse whose hands shook and didn't tell her anything. Here's what I know. The sound of boots on wet grit is not always a threat. Sometimes it's a measure. Sometimes it's a count to keep your feet steady over the dark. When I turn around, the street is empty. When I don't, I'm not alone. I go home and the gate sticks and the key fights back, and I sleep because I have to be up again to pour coffee for people who've made it through their own nights. And on the worst nights, when the alley smells like old grease and the dogs watch without blinking, and the OPE sign is a joke only the dark laughs at, I say the one thing I never say in daylight. Not hello, not please. I say walk me, and listen for the scuff that means yes, and keep going and don't look back to see what isn't there. I didn't start checking over my shoulder until October, when Austin finally cooled and the night smelled like wet pennies. I worked the late desk at the library, loaner laptops, paper jams, freshmen looking for a 4th floor that didn't exist, then crossed to the student lot behind communications. Asphalt, chalk lines, a tilting lamppost everyone called the deadlight because it hadn't worked in years. The first time I saw him, he looked like a habit someone left leaning against the pole, ankle to metal, head tipped as if listening. No phone, no smoke, no shift. I clicked my fob, watched my hatchback wink, and kept my walk even. The air by him felt colder the way a grocery freezer leaks across your arm. He didn't look up. I drove home with talk radio, a murmur, and copper at the back of my tongue. He was there again 2 nights later. And again after that, different hours, same posture, same dead cone of light. Coincidence turned into a chorus. At 1 a.m., over microwave tacos, I told my roommate Zoe, "Call campus police," she said. "Or me. I'll bring the horn." The horn is pink and ridiculous. The picture of her blasting it at 2 in the morning made me laugh, which shrank the fear small enough to hold. The librarian on duty called the pole a fossil. "Power's cut at the base," she said. I stacked rituals anyway. No earbuds, keys between fingers, back into the spot for a fast exit. Text Zoe when I start walking. Rituals are sandbags. They don't stop a flood. They show you where the water will go. On the 4th encounter, a thin rain stitched the lot. I angled toward the trash can to pass near without committing to conversation. At 30 feet, the hair on my arms rose. Not because he moved. Because he didn't. His head had the tilt of someone who already knew the answer. "Hey," I said, as if I were asking a question I hoped he wouldn't hear. The word went nowhere. It felt like talking into a closet. I kept walking. Near him, the smell was cold rubber and dust, like a garage in winter. 2 nights later, I called campus police. A young officer walked out with me and tapped the base of the pole. "Been dead for years," he said. "No juice." He took my number and told me to call if I saw him again in a voice that stayed careful not to say "if you think you saw him." After he left, I rested my palm on the metal. It felt like bone. For a while, I didn't see the man at all, or I saw him everywhere. Reflections, elevator doors, the corner of my eye. I parked nearer to the pole as if proximity meant control. With the window cracked, I listened to insects needle the grass and the far siren thread that sews the city together. Sometimes a cloth whisper lifted from the corner, the sound of someone changing their mind very slowly. The air would cool a fraction, and I would pretend the wind was practicing. One night, the lot wore a skin of rain. I stepped out and didn't lock the car so I wouldn't fumble. 5 steps toward the pole, and I heard it. A faint tap, metal on metal, like a coin against a pipe. It came from the base, where the access panel sat slightly ajar, screw chewed into a soft star. My flashlight snagged on sticker residue and a paper wasp nest like lace. Inside the hollow, something shifted, cloth scuffing metal. The panel didn't swing open. It pressed inward, as if what was behind it leaned harder. I ran in the practical way you run when you've left the stove on. The car felt like a mouth I dove into. I reversed too fast and fishtailed. In the red wash of my brake lights, the dead light stood perfectly still. I hid from the lot for 3 days. Uber, Zoe's bike, any detour that let me be the kind of person who wasn't afraid because she wasn't there. Daylight fixed nothing, but maintenance pretended it did. The panel got new bright screws. Orange chalk scrawled "rewire" at the base. Students posed under the newly working bulb like it was a Christmas tree. Relief made me foolish and happy. I parked close on purpose. When I left at 1:06 a.m., the bulb blinked once, the way a person rearranges their face before speaking. It steadied. At the exit, my headlights washed the pole and the panel looked not quite flush. Just a hairline seam, black as a mouth. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed halfway across the lot. An unknown number, my name, and a single word. Alone? The dots came and went. I didn't turn my head. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors with my whole hand. Another buzz. Alone? Like customer service. The third ping was a photo. My car right then, rain webbing the glass, my face a pale coin lit by the phone. The angle wasn't from any camera. It was level with my passenger door, where a person might stand in the space the weather stripping left a breath-wide gap. I laid on the horn until my palm numbed. A window opened in the dorm beyond the fence. Somebody yelled. The sound was rude and human and kept me from crying. The text stopped. The number was no longer in service, and which is exactly the sentence a nightmare would pick. I filed a report with an older officer whose hair made a gray tide line. He promised a patrol on the hour and gave me a blue card with a number like a lifeguard's whistle. I kept it under my phone case where it warmed my palm. The light stayed fixed. Students blessed it by forgetting how it used to be. I started sleeping again, scraps of it. On a windy Thursday, Zoe walked with me. "If I see him," she said, "I will commit a felony with this horn." We laughed too big. Under the dead light, no one. As we turned away, something tapped inside the pole, soft as a nail set with a single polite strike. We both paused. "Rats," Zoe said briskly and kept moving. I pretended to believe her because pretending is a muscle. Midterms ended. The city smelled like leaf mold and dryer vents. From the dorm stairwell landing, you can see over the fence into the lot. On certain nights, the deadlight makes a white column and bugs drift through like thoughts you can't unthink. From there, it looks solid enough to lean on, which is ridiculous, which is how I used to feel about a man who never moved. If you need a clean ending, there isn't one. Nothing happened, and it keeps happening. The number never texted again. The panel stayed shut. Security changed corners. The librarian moved my shift earlier. Light poured where darkness used to sit, and everyone decided that meant the story was over. I learned how to walk normal again, mostly, but light is only where you can't see the dark, and all light makes shadows. On the last cold night before the warm spell, I pulled into my spot under the repaired lamp. The bulb hummed like a throat. The radio hiccuped into static that tasted like pennies. I told myself wires, weather, coincidence. I reached for my bag and froze, not because of a sound, but the lack of one. The lot holds 1,000 small noises, crickets, vents, distant traffic. All at once it felt padded, like the world had put cotton in its ears. A tap came from the pole. Then a second, patient as counting. The panel sat neat. The screws shone. I opened my door and stood, and felt more than heard the taps through the concrete under my shoes. 3, then stillness so clean it whistled in my ears. I put my palm to the metal. Cold, then colder, seeping like spilled water. From inside the hollow came the smallest whisper, cloth on metal. I thought of that first tilt, how he listened rather than watched, as if timing mattered more than sight. I didn't run. I got in the car and rolled to the exit. My headlights washed the pole. In that wash, everything looked ordinary. But at the seam where metal met concrete, where the sealant missed by a hair, the rain shimmered. Something, only the idea of something, seemed to draw back from that crack, the way breath draws back when light passes over it. I go earlier now. I text friends to meet me. I keep the horn in the passenger seat like a saint on a dashboard. On certain nights, if you stand on the stairwell landing and wait, you can hear it too. A patient metal tapping inside something built to hold wires, not a man. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Not loud, not urgent, just counting. Sometimes when I'm honest, I think the man under the dead light was never a man at all. Maybe he was a habit taking shape. Maybe he was what happens when a dead thing learns to lean. Or maybe he was exactly what I saw. A stalker who discovered a place no one looks. Who knows when a student leaves the library alone because silence tells him? Because darkness teaches him? Because a broken pole gave him a room without walls? The ending is this. The lamp works. The lot is bright. I lock my doors, sleep some, and tell myself better stories. But when my phone buzzes late and an unknown number blooms with a single word and a question mark, I feel the hollow of the pole in my own ribs. The message never arrives. The screen stays black. The light hums. And from the corner where the wind is a fraction colder, I count with it. Dad says the wind talks on flatland. Says if you stand quiet enough by the fence line, the wire will tell you rain is coming, or cattle are getting restless, or a coyote nose through looking for a weak spot. He says you can tell it by the way the barbs sing. I believed him when I was little because fathers are supposed to know what the land is saying. I'm 17 now and I can't decide if he really hears it or if he just hates silence. That summer the heat pressed down like a hand and the evenings never cooled right. We'd eat late after chores, beans that tasted like cast iron, tortillas warmed right on the burner. And he would flick the porch light off and say, "Hush," as if I'd ruined a good song by breathing. That's when I first noticed the pacing shape beyond the east fence. A dark vertical moving up and back along the boundary, slow as a plumb bob, patient as a cow chewing cud. It moved while we ate. It moved while the cicadas droned so loud they felt like static in your skull. It moved until the porch bulb finally warmed out a circle and then it would be gone. Coyotes, Dad said when I told him. They ghost along a line. They learn the fence like a road. I've never seen a coyote smoke, I said a few nights later, holding up the Marlboro butt I'd found pushed into the clay by the corner post. It had a smear of lipstick that was either real or the heat had bled the filter like paint. He pinched the butt, rolled his eyes, and tossed it into the coffee can we keep for snake shot shells. You found someone's trash. Folks cut through sometimes. Don't go playing detective. But when you're 17 and everything feels like a dare, you pick at things. I started walking the fence at dusk with the dog, Daisy, a healer who was born tired and worried. The barbed wire sings even when you just brush it. It has a high, tight voice like a violin string that got tuned until it wanted to snap. The mesquite throws shadows shaped like antlers. Prickly pear catches your jeans when it's feeling mean. Past our line, the scrub just runs and runs until it blurs into somebody else's nothing. Out there, the pacing had etched a narrow path that wasn't coyotes. No trotting ovals, no scat, no pads pressed in pairs. Boot prints mostly. Left heel a little worn down, toe turning out. The line was so straight it felt drawn. The first carving turned up on a Wednesday. I was fixing a staple that had popped out of a juniper post, leaning my stomach into the wire and cussing the way you can only cuss when your dad's out of earshot. The sun was about to fall in and dump its last red into the grass. That's when I saw the shallow grooves on the wood low like whoever cut them squatted. Not letters. Not the hearts people carve at camp. 3 vertical scratches, evenly spaced, and a 4th scraping across them like someone setting the tally to 4. I didn't touch it. Didn't want the splinters. I took my phone out instead and snapped a picture I wouldn't show Dad. When I turned around, Daisy was pointed toward the far side of the field. Nose high, tail down, trembling like a twig in current. I waited to see what she'd do. She whined once, the sound you make when you've been found out, and then she backed up into my shins. The next morning we moved the cows to the north pasture and didn't talk about fence posts. Dad told me to watch the gates and mind the calves that want to double back. Every ranch chore is a little test in patience and geometry, learning which path a dumb animal thinks is freedom. The wire kept its own counsel. That night, the pacing came back and walked its seam while we sat in the dark and pretended we didn't hear it. When I finally stood, Dad said, "Sit down, Mason. He's got as much right to the night as us." It slipped out like he'd already decided. By Friday, there were more carvings. Tally marks added to the first and a second set at eye level for me. My name wasn't there, but I felt it anyway, like a cough I couldn't quite hack up. Daisy started refusing the evening walk. She'd plant her feet and look at me with wet marbles. I went out alone. It's strange how wide land can feel like a hallway. With the moon smeared thin behind clouds, the fence looked like a hallway wall. The posts like door frames. Somewhere far off, the windmill creaked and then creaked again. The sound of an old man rolling his shoulder. I had Dad's flashlight and tried not to point it all the way out. Just at my feet, just ahead. Like you do when you don't want to show anyone how nervous you are. The beam picked up another cigarette butt shoved into a crack of dry dirt, and a dark wet spot I told myself was spit. The smells were all ordinary. Dust, mesquite sap. The rancid sweet of something dead a day or two, but they stacked until I felt crowded. I turned to go back and the wire sang with no touch at all. A tiny quiver rippling post to post. I stood still and heard footsteps beyond the edge of light. Soft, measured, a slow turn. "Dad?" I said, knowing it wasn't him, hating the pleading in my voice. The footsteps stopped. The smell of smoke came to me. Not cigarette exactly, but the damp stub itself. That paper and tar sweetness revived by breath. And then a whisper, close like a hand clowning your ear. "Don't turn the light on me." The voice was neither young nor old. Dusty. A voice you'd believe if it told you rain was coming. I ran. The flashlight bounced me into fences and yucca. Daisy met me halfway and didn't scold. When I got to the porch, Dad was in his chair with his boots still on, holding his beer by the neck. He took one look and knew more than I'd tell him. "You crossed the wire?" he asked. "No," I lied. He spoke. "What did he say?" I repeated it and immediately hated repeating it. Words are like smells that way. They stick once you bring them inside. Dad drained the bottle and set it down like it had insulted him. "Don't go out there at night again. I'll set the camera." He bolted a cheap trail cam to the corner post the next morning and bought new batteries like he was putting out candy for Halloween. 2 nights of pacing later, we checked the SD card at the kitchen table. Click after click of empty grass, the fence glowing white in infrared. A moth like a ghost thumb. The timestamps matched when I'd heard footsteps. It was all there except the person. "It's the cheap camera," I said, and Dad didn't argue. He said another, a nicer one we borrowed from my uncle, and then wired a third to the gate so tight you could have played jingles on the stretch. The next carving appeared on the inside face of a post, inside our line. The grooves had depth this time, Notches for height, like when you stand in the pantry and measure your growth in pencil. The top scratch sat right where my shoulder would hit if I leaned. I put my back to it and found the notch the way you do with a suit jacket in a store. It felt like a hand settling there. Beneath the mark, someone had cut a long oval, sloppy at the ends like the shape of an eye. That night, nobody paced. That was worse. The quiet draped over everything until the crickets felt like they were chirping under my skin. I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the voice when Daisy growled low. Not a bark, not a whine. The noise dogs make when they've chosen the thing they'll die trying to scare off. Her paws lifted slow, one then the other. The barbed wire sang. Just one string, like a finger had brushed it once. The gate latch jiggled. Dad was up and moving before I was. He didn't turn on a light. He moved through the kitchen like a shadow with a grudge, took the shotgun from behind the fridge like he was unsheathing a promise, and stepped onto the porch. "You stay," he said, and pushed the screen door so careful it didn't squeal. I stayed until he got 10 yards, and then I didn't. The grass makes a sound you feel more than hear when it snakes your shins. The temperature drops in the low spots. Dad's boots hit the dry ground like soft coughs. The pale gate stood all at once in the dark, the posts like shoulders. The top hinge squeaked and Dad grimaced like he'd embarrassed us in front of a guest. He lifted the wire and slipped through. I followed. We expected movement. The kind that runs when you show yourself, the kind that tests how much you want to chase. There wasn't any. Just the space of night, the smell of someone else's breath just gone. Dad shone the light along the path. Boot prints right where they ought to be, double back toward the old sheep shed, and then nothing. They stopped at a stretch of hardpan like whoever made them had been taken up in a balloon. Dad bounced the beam around the juniper and the feed barrels and then let it ride back to the gate. To me, to my face. "You go back," he said. "He wants you out. How do you know?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The next morning before chores, I found a new carving. It was on the post nearest my bedroom window. The tally marks were arranged like a ladder now, and beside them the oval eye had been sketched again. Deeper, the inner lines scratched to make a pupil. Beneath it, a single line that looked like a mouth or a horizon. Or a fence. The shavings were still clinging where the knife had lifted. He'd been there while I slept. The sheriff won't come out for art. Dad made the call anyway and got a sigh and a, "We'll cruise by if we're on that road." We never are on that road because that road is a loop. Nothing leads to. Dad cursed the county, then cursed city boys who think a ranch is a hobby, then had to sit because cussing takes the air out of him these days. He set a folding chair by the east fence that afternoon like he was going to fish. Daisy lay under it and panted. The flies did what flies do. The sun baked everything to the same color. We waited. The hours layered. A vulture drew circles that didn't widen or tighten, just corrected its own corrections. When night slid in, Dad handed me the flashlight, then didn't let go for a second. "He wants you to look," he said. "Don't give him all he wants." "What if he wants me to be scared?" I asked. "Then you're already giving it away. Something about a father telling you that makes you double the debt." The first sound we heard was the fence, a low hum steady enough to make your teeth ache. Then, hard to say if it came before or after a match strike. That chalky hiss like a small defiant meteor. The ember lifted, floated a human distance above the ground and moved. We smelled it before the wind should have let us. I saw the red eye of it travel up and back along the fence line. Exactly straight, exactly patient. Dad didn't lift the gun. I didn't lift the light. We listened to the pacing and the drag of a boot and a soft exhale that belonged to breath that had learned not to be heard. It went on so long that the first cramp in my back turned to a second and I had to shift my weight on the gravel, just to stay human. The ember stopped across from me, hung, and then fell and died with a little sigh. "Evening," a voice said, and even though it was the same dusty tone, the way it said evening made my skin try to run off without me. It stood long enough for my name to gather in my mouth, then said, "Don't make me climb." Dad took one step forward then, not brave so much as unable to sit still. "You're on the line," he said. "You got a problem, you take it to the county." A laugh the size of a mouse. "He's tall," the voice said, and I realized it wasn't talking to Dad. It was talking to the fence, to the post with marks, to something that wasn't a person. I pointed the flashlight then because every atom of me wanted to see and not seeing had become a kind of pain. The beam struck the wire and ricocheted, flashed out along the barbs like a zipper of frost. I raised it a hair and caught a hat brim, a shoulder under denim, a jaw rough with a day's work. The eyes weren't in the beam. He'd put his hand up to hide them, and in that hand was a knife. Not raised, not even threatening, just there like a habit. He stood facing me, and then the beam shook and I lost him. And when I found the spot again, all I saw was our own field. Empty and wide, and the wire twanging as if someone had just gone over. Dad swore soft enough to be a prayer. "You go inside," he said. I didn't. I lay on my bed later and watched the square of window glow and dim with the thin clouds and thought of the tallies and the eye and the line under it. The house made its night noises, refrigerator coughs, wood stretching. I must have slept because the dream I woke from had my mother in it, younger, spinning and laughing as if the land didn't touch her. When I blinked the real room back, the glow at the window was wrong. It flickered. Not candle wrong. Not bulb wrong. A slow reddening, a slow fade. The smell reached me first, ashy sweetness, close. I sat up and saw it. A cigarette poised at the edge of the screen just above the sill, held steady by a hand I couldn't see. The ember breathing in and out as if thinking. "Don't turn the light on me," the voice said from the other side of the mesh. Not loud, not a whisper, conversation distance. I didn't move. The mattress springs had never seemed so loud. The ember drew in and brightened, and I could make out a bit of the hand. 2 knuckles, a slice of a finger through the screen pattern, a line of scar that cut across the ridge. It lowered until it touched the window frame, and I heard the faintest fizz of heat meeting paint. "Why?" I asked, hating the boy in my voice, hating the way I meant it. He was patient with his answer. "Because when you do, it makes shadows. What do you want?" This time he didn't answer me. The ember wrote a slow circle on the wood, small, deliberate burns like punctuation. It made an oval. It added lines inside it until it looked like the scratch eye on the post. He smoked and drew an eye on the sill of my room. Dad came in so fast the door bounced off the wall. The overhead light snapped on and the screen became a mirror. In that mirror I saw myself and Dad and the drawn eye and nothing else. When he threw the window up, the screen went soft out, and he had the shotgun up and ready to break the world, and all it held was night. He fired anyway, 2 blasts into a field of grass that would not be impressed. The answering quiet set every cricket back to work with double zeal. In the morning, we found footprints under the window. Boots left heel-worn, toe turned out, a smear on the sill where a knuckle had rested. Ash caught in the track of the frame. On the fence post closest to my room, the tallies had grown. The top of the ladder rose 1/2 inch. Dad ran his thumb over the burns and got quiet in a way that scared me more than the night voice had. He dragged the chair inside and set it against my wall. He put the gun across his lap. He told me to go to school. I didn't. The ranch doesn't ask for absence notes. I sat at the table and drank coffee like it was medicine and watched dust show itself in the light. Around noon, a pickup I didn't know eased down our drive slow. Guy alone, hat low. He didn't get out. He watched the house a while, then turned around. Tires making that sifting sound gravel makes when it gives up on holding you. Dad wrote the plate on an envelope and later pretended he'd lost the envelope. He said he didn't want to make a thing bigger than it was. We got a lock for the gate even though locks are jokes on land like ours. We kept the porch light on, then off, then on again. The pacing came and went. The carvings appeared and deepened. The camera clicked and saw no one. That should have been the worst of it, endless almost. Instead, something finally changed. He left something on the top wire one morning, threaded neat on a barb like ribbon, a strip of denim cut from a cuff, frayed to strings. On the blue there was writing in ballpoint, letters blown fat by fabric, tall enough now. Dad took it off with pliers and burned it in the grill without looking at me. The smoke had a chemical stink and the wind blew it straight back into our faces like a joke. He cried. I pretended not to see. We left that fall. Not because of fear exactly, though fear rode in the cab with us the whole way out. The price Dad got for the herd made leaving sound like strategy. The new place is closer to town. There is no barbed wire at the property line, just a wooden slat fence you buy in panels. The night sounds are tires on the highway and a neighbor's television moaning through drywall. It's louder and I sleep easier. For a while I did. Last week I took a job that had me out late. I drove home on a road that used to be caliche and is now asphalt and unromantic. I rolled the window down for the first cool night of the year. somewhere between where our old gate used to be and the dry creek with the iron bridge. I heard it. A faint, high singing that wasn't in the radio and wasn't in the tires. A voice a wire might make when something light touched it. I pulled over even though there's nowhere to pull over on a memory. I killed the engine. The cicadas had gone to bed for the season. The wind said mesquite. The darkness said land. It came from the right. A flicker that was neither star nor reflector. A brief breath of red, then dark, then red again. I stood with my hand on the roof because that made me feel like I hadn't been pulled out of myself. I didn't call Dad, I didn't call anyone. The ember bobbed twice and then dropped. I walked to where I thought the fence would be if fences stayed in your life after you sold them. There was nothing to catch my hand, no barb to sing. Just empty air and maybe the old line of a path made by a man with a left heel worn down and a toe turned out. I stood where a post might have been. I lifted my palm to nothing. For a second, I know I dreamed it, I must have. I felt the faintest nick of old wire bite me. The sort of sting that means you've touched the edge of what keeps things in and keeps things out. I looked down and saw in the dust a set of marks, not carved, not burned, just the way grass is bent when someone draws their finger through slowly. An oval, a pupil, a line that might be a mouth or might be a horizon. I put my shoulder against air where the ladder of tallies should be, and realized I'd grown not so much in height as into the space the carvings had made for me. Dad says the wind talks on flat land. He says you only ever hear it right at the wire. Some nights I think the fence was never there to keep anything from crossing. Some nights I think it was there to teach patience, to show you how a thing can pace and wait and touch you without ever coming all the way in. In my new room with its ordinary window, I keep hearing the barbs in my head, the way they sing when something brushes them in passing. Every so often, in that space where you're almost asleep and honest, I smell the damp sweetness of a cigarette stub that thinks it's been revived by breath. I don't turn the light on. I don't give him all he wants. I lie there and listen to nothing and to the wire I can't see and tell myself the same story. There is no fence here. There is no fence. There is no fence. And I wait for the night to tell me whether that means I'm safe or that I'm already outside. I've spent more nights in borrowed rooms than my own bed. You learn the squeak of ice machines, the grit that blows under a door, the kind of tired that smells like someone else's soap. After a double shift at the hospital in El Paso, I took the first cheap vacancy I found. The Javelina Inn, slumped beside the frontage road with a cracked neon sign coughing pink into the dust. The wind was up, shouldering the walls like a restless animal. I told the clerk my name, showed him my badge, and he slid a keycard toward me with fingers stained by printer ink. "Phone in the room works," he said, like that was a selling point. "If you need anything, dial 0. Weather mumbled on the TV behind him, dry rain for New Mexico. I climbed to 2B and opened the door into a familiar kind of nowhere. Beige walls, air conditioner rattling like loose dice, a bedspread trying to be geometric and failing. I set my backpack on the chair, lined the remote in a Kleenex like I always do, and went to wash the day off my face. The bathroom mirror held me the way strangers do, polite, uninterested. I wiped away a crescent of fog with my wrist and said, "You're fine," just to hear a normal voice. I was halfway through a gas station sandwich when the room phone rang. The handset was the exact color of old teeth, heavy as a jawbone. I answered, reflex over curiosity. "Hello." Breathing. Not panicked, not asthmatic, just a steady tide. "Someone listening to me listen." "Wrong room," I said, and hung up softly like that mattered. The phone rang again almost immediately. I let it go until the sound wore itself out. Wind combed under the door. The vacancy sign ticked like a bad clock. I checked the peephole. Nothing but orange parking lot glow in the shadow of the railing. After the third call, I went down to the desk. The same clerk looked up from a binder. "You've got somebody calling 2B, I said. He turned the binder so I could see columns of times and room numbers. 2B was a quiet row of dashes. "No calls have gone through to your room," he said. "Lines are direct. Nobody dialed it." The way he said it made the fact feel flat and finished. "Want me to unplug the phone?" I did. Back upstairs, I tugged the cord free and let the handset sit mute on the table. I texted my sister a picture of the ice bucket with the caption "luxury." She sent back her cat, disapproving. For a little while, the night returned to being only night. Teeth brushed, face washed, again because the act is often more important than the result. The mirror fogged and cleared. When it cleared, I saw words. not written on the surface, smeared inside the silvering like someone had pressed a finger through the glass from the other side. Don't look away. They weren't letters so much as swipes with round ends where a fingertip would lift. I touched the surface and felt my print slide over the trapped ones. I wanted to think chemistry, vandalism, a trick of the light. Instead, I stood there, forcing myself not to blink in case blinking was the doorway. The unplugged phone rang, not properly. It rang from far away, like a toy phone left in a closet. The little message light glowed red. I watched it ring on the desk, the cord lying separate like a cut vein. It rang until silence fell as neat as a towel. The mirror's words sat patiently. Behind me, the curtains shivered as if a hand had just left them. I locked the door, slid the chain through the bolt, and went back to the desk. House line must be crossing, the clerk said, considering, like he was rehearsing the idea. Or CB bleed. We got truckers, he tried on a smile. You can move to 3C. Relief is a dangerous drug, but I took it. The mirror in 3C was clean. The room smelled like lemon over cigarettes, and I told myself the other one had been a trick of steam and nerves. I slept a little, the kind of sleep where you keep one ear out like a dog in a thunderstorm. Sometime past midnight, pressure changed. The door breathed. I opened my eyes to TV blue dark. The red light on the dead phone was alive again. In the bathroom, the light stood on with the door mostly shut, as if someone who cared about me had tried not to wake me. The new message in the mirror waited. You know me. Under it, smaller swipes, hesitant, you saw me, a memory unlatched. A kid in another town, another motel, Odessa maybe, standing in a bathroom doorway while I set a line in his mother's arm. Brown eyes, still and too old. A hand pressed flat to glass while he watched me make his mom safer than he could. Other memories. A man breathing his last in the night while I counted blankets and heartbeats. My own face in a dozen mirrors on a dozen mornings, stranger to itself. The feeling wasn't recognition so much as responsibility. As if the mirror were a chart I'd left unsigned. I don't know you, I said to the glass and heard how wrong that was. The phone light blinked slower as if pacing me. The breathing started again, not through the phone, but behind me, close enough to chill my shoulders. I turned toward the doorway but kept my eyes on the mirror because I already understood how this worked. The glass told the truth. The air refused. In the mirror, a man stood by the bed where the room behind me was empty. Not tall, not short, shirt the color of curtains. Head tilted like a person listening for his own name. Where his eyes should have been were dark hollows that looked like worn places, as if someone had rested their face against the glass for years. He lifted a hand. The reflection of my hand rose without my telling it to. Its shadow meeting his palm on the silver skin between us. Cold bled into my bones. The smears beneath our hands shifted, trying to make language with no mouth to shape it. Not a trick, the strokes insisted. Still here, what do you want? I asked. The shape steadied. Stay. At first, I thought he meant stay in this room like a jealous ghost with a territorial streak. But the way he tilted his head toward the bed made something else click. He meant the staying I've been worst at. I've always been the person who packs, who drives away healthy, who leaves the ache where it lies because there's another shift, another set of vitals to check, another small disaster to occupy the hands. He was looking not at me but at the dent my body had left on the sheets like a negative space that proved I had been present without promising I would remain. No, I said softly. I have to work. Saying it made me real. I have to go. The red light pulsed once, then steadied. The figure in the mirror didn't move, but something about the way his shoulders settled felt like understanding the answer before I said it. I dressed. Packed, wrote a note for the empty front desk, emergency at hospital, and walked out into the vacancy-ticked wind. In the car, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unknown number. I let the road carry me a few miles before I listened. Breathing again, but at the very end, a tiny scrape, like a fingertip on glass. The soft sound people make when they're trying to be brave and can't be yet. The next day at the hospital brought the kind of work that keeps you anchored. Blood pressures, meds, a woman whose husband wouldn't wake up until he did. I laughed at something stupid a tech said and heard sunlight in my own mouth. I avoided the stainless steel mirror in the break room. That night I booked a different motel in Las Cruces and told myself I'd been tired. You can live a long time on stories you tell yourself with a steady voice. Weeks later, a nurse messaged me. You ever stay at the Javelina? Mirrors there are weird. I typed no, then yes, then what did you see? She never answered. Sometimes, washing my face at home, I swipe steam off the mirror and for a second the silver remembers the words it held. Don't look away. Or it's just the shape of my hand telling me something I've ignored. Here is the part I don't say in break rooms. On mornings in strange rooms when my face looks borrowed, I give the mirror a small wave. 2 fingers like a nurse stepping away from a bed. If there's someone on the other side, I want them to know I am sorry for all the times I left. If there's no one, it's still a practice in staying. A promise to keep my eyes on what hurts instead of blinking it away. The phone rings now and then from numbers with no names. I let most calls pass, but once in a while I answer, and if there's only breathing, I listen back. I wait for the faint scrape at the end, the sound of a palm sliding down, of someone leaning into the silver to get closer. When it comes, I tell them, or myself, or whatever lives between the two, I'm here. Not forever, not perfectly, but I'm not looking away.